K-beauty has gained immense, huge popularity around the world in recent years, but in the most recent years, it's grown significantly, being known for its real cutting-edge technology when it comes to cosmetics and its focus on preventative and protection when it comes to the skin, all at really affordable prices. And unsurprisingly, it's no different when it comes to its sunscreen. Korean sunscreens have been popular amongst beauty enthusiasts for a pretty long time now, mainly known for their lightweight, non-greasy formulas that absorb super quick without leaving residue, but also having really high SPF ratings. But it's that last point there that we're going to be focusing on today. The Korean sunscreen scandal really did rock the industry a few years ago. I think we're talking like COVID times now. And today I want to explore what happened, how it happened, and where Korean sunscreen brands stand today, and kind of really get down to who was responsible for all of this. But first of all, let's talk about how Korean sunscreen became so popular. It really all began back in the early 2010s, kind of when I started YouTube as well. It kind of just aligned with K-beauty becoming popular and people discovering their sunscreens really, alongside the overall increase of popularity in Korean skincare and culture. And it may have actually been a very particular sunscreen product that really led the way for K-beauty in the Western market. A lot of people will argue, skincare enthusiasts, makeup artists alike actually, that the launch of the BB cream by Dr. Jart marked the beginning of K-beauty's rising popularity in the West. It was like a skincare hybrid makeup foundation sunscreen that no one had ever really seen before, meets a moisturizer, and it was this kind of like innovation that has really propelled Korean sunscreen to the top. You know, we had BB creams, but they were popularized in Asia, but this melange of products really wasn't seen before. And here in the West, whenever you thought of sunscreen, you thought of thick, sunscreeny smelling, greasy, white chalky sunscreens. And at the time, sunscreen felt like something we kind of had to do just on like a day at the beach so that we don't burn, but it was never really enjoyable, cosmetically elegant in any way whatsoever. Thick, chalky, you know, pitsbuin. And what K-beauty managed to successfully do, and Japanese beauty as well, of course, they managed to transform something that was so nasty for people to use, that haunted our childhood, into something lightweight, cosmetically elegant and effective and pleasant to use, and something people wanted to use on a daily basis when we also became knowledgeable of the anti-aging benefits. And also as well, mineral sunscreens were kind of more popular here, especially in the UK, especially for kids as well. And of course, not everybody can use a mineral sunscreen. They're thick, they're chalky, zinc oxide, titanium dioxide. Not everybody of every skin tone and color can wear them. I mean, barely even white people can wear them to the beach without looking a bit gray. And chemical sunscreens were actually more popular in Korean at the time, and they contain UV filters such as avobenzone, oxybenzone, and octinoxide. Oh my god, octinoxate, this one. Their chemical sunscreens make use of chemical filters that also aren't approved in America, for example, but we do have similar ones here in Europe. So especially in America, a lot of people were experiencing this kind of like completely different kind of formulation for the first time. People couldn't quite believe that this lightweight, elegant formulation was a sunscreen. And this is obviously a huge deal as well, right? When you have to reapply sunscreen at least every 2 hours when you're outside in the sun, having something build up that's chalky and smells like sunscreen, you know? And they usually shove coconut in it to try and make it smell nice, like pineapple. But having something this lightweight that was also sometimes waterproof that you could reapply was incredible, transformative of the industry. Not only that, but people were using them as primers as well, makeup primers, because they sat so well under makeup. So people were using them every day with no hassle whatsoever, and seeing how simply just adding a sunscreen regularly to your skincare routine could really transform your skin, everything from fine lines to dark spots. Also meaning that all skin tones, skin colors can use Korean sunscreens. Fast forward to now, you can buy them in Boots here in the UK, and like Target in the US, they are widely available. And as I mentioned, they grew through popularity throughout the 2010s, soon becoming the go-to choice for skincare enthusiasts and eventually general consumers as well. That was until late 2020. Oh, that feels like so long ago now. It was only 4 years ago? Where are we? Nearly 5? When a scandal broke that would really cause severe damage to the reputation of not just Korean sunscreen brands, but the K-beauty industry as a whole. The scandal came to light in December of 2020 when questions were raised about the actual efficacy of some really highly popular sunscreens at the time. And obviously this isn't the case now, but they were the best sunscreens at the time, the most popular, because they just didn't feel like sunscreen. sunscreens. It all started when Inky Coda, a website known for explaining ingredients in a very good scientific way without being like Yucca and Think Dirt and all that kind of stuff, basically cast doubt on the SPF claims made by certain sunscreens. In a cosmetics business article, the founder of Inky Coda, Judith Ratz, said, "Looking at the formula and seeing only 2 filters, I raised my eyebrows. Having doubts, I asked our sunscreen formulator's opinion, specifically on the Perito Centella Unscented Sun and how he thinks it might be possible to achieve an SPF 50 plus with these 2 filters and these low amounts." He answered me pointing to false SPF ratings that were used in the past, essentially saying that it is highly doubtful that the SPF claim on the Perito product is realistic. Now bear with, because it wouldn't just be Perito that would come under fire for this. Third-party laboratory tests were then carried out by 2 different independent labs on the Perito Centella Green Level Unscented Sun SPF 50 plus, one of the most popular Korean sunscreens at the time, which featured on a number of best sunscreen lists. And despite being an SPF 50 plus, Perito actually said it's roughly around SPF 84.5. However, the results from both the independent labs showed that the sunscreen only offered a really low and disappointing SPF rating of 19, far below what it had claimed to provide, far below 84. And this finding caused a ripple effect throughout the beauty community, raising doubts about the accuracy of SPF claims for other K-beauty sunscreens as well, especially as at the time, Perito were quick to pass the blame onto their manufacturer, a manufacturer who were also responsible for making a number of the most popular sunscreen brands at the time. As a result, some of the other most popular, most viral sunscreens at the time, including Dear Klairs Soft Airy UV Essence SPF 50 plus, Crave Beauty's Beat the Sun, and Keep Cool's Soothe Bamboo Sun Essence SPF 50 plus, also brought into question and also failed independent SPF testing, all having SPF results much lower than what they were advertising. Thinking about it now, random thought actually, when I was reviewing these sunscreens back in the day, and I was one of those K-beauty reviewers that loved these sunscreens, and I would use them religiously every day, every 2 hours, especially in the summer, and I would get comments from people saying like, I really wanted to love the Klairs, I really wanted to love Perito, but I was getting burnt on days out when I was using this. And I was like, are you sure you're using it right? Like, are you using it every 2 hours? And people would be like, yeah, I am, like, I'm still getting burnt. And I was like, they must be using it wrong, or they must have a dud or something like that. It was suspicious how so many people were actually burning whilst using this sunscreen. Those who were fans of K-beauty and Korean sunscreens at the time, or Asian sunscreens in general actually, may be wondering whether the PA ratings were also affected by the scandal. If you didn't already know, Korean sunscreens and Japanese sunscreens actually have a PA rating system, and this applies to the UVA rays specifically, rather than the UVB rays, which is what the SPF rating refers to. UVB rays are what cause burning, and UVA is what we kind of say are like aging. UV burn, UV age. And you know, you should always use a broad spectrum sunscreen anyway, like a broad range, broad spectrum, yeah. And the UVA, UVB rating is pretty much just that, right? I personally prefer the Asian brand way of doing it to have the PA rating, because you kind of like get a good level in there too. However, in regards to this scandal specifically, the PA ratings don't seem to have been scrutinized in the same way, or maybe it's just all part of the same thing. I'm not really sure. Regardless, this revelation regarding the lower SPF ratings was a huge blow to the reputation of Korean sunscreens and K-beauty as a whole. People now just like were so wary of what any product and any brand were kind of advertising, but also sunscreens as a whole. A lot of people did kind of like just zero in on K-beauty, but people were thinking, if these popular brands weren't providing what they said they were, then how can we trust any other brand? And I guess like the SPF sunscreen rating system in general. And they were right to think that, because this wasn't just a Korean sunscreen brand issue. In 2015, Choice magazine tested 6 Australian sunscreens and found that only 2 provided the SPF listed on the label. A 2016 report by Consumer Reports found that 23 out of 60 US sunscreens they tested provided only half the SPF that they claimed on the label. And in October of 2020, the Hong Kong Consumer Council found that 25 out of 30 sunscreens tested provided less protection than they claimed. And this particular particular one included Japanese, Korean, and Western sunscreens. So this wasn't just a K-beauty issue, but because K-beauty was so popular and like the talk of the town at the time, people really did zero in on K-beauty. So what happened to the brands involved? It wasn't as simple as just like apologizing and moving on and fixing it, although it kind of was at the same time. The most prominent brand affected by the scandal was arguably Purito. I remember just everyone being really angry at Purito. The brand's reputation took a massive hit, with so many consumers feeling betrayed and questioning the brand's integrity, many even boycotting their products as a result of the scandal, like filming themselves throwing it in the bin, that kind of stuff. The usual. However, many, including myself actually, have also praised Purito's handling of the controversy because they just did it so well. They handled it so well, and this has really helped build back up confidence in the brand. The brand publicly apologized for the issue and voluntarily recalled all their sunscreens. They offered refunds as well, and although they did pass the blame to the manufacturer right at the beginning, many actually appreciated the level of transparency from the brand regarding the issue, how they were going to correct it, and they really did share the whole journey of like taking the sunscreens away, what went wrong, retesting sunscreens, then making new ones. And in the aftermath of the scandal, they actually worked with third-party labs to reformulate their sunscreen line to ensure more accurate SPF ratings, and they re-entered the market in late 2021 with a new formula. And they actually took their followers, especially on Instagram, on this journey with them to make a new sunscreen. I think it was 2 new sunscreens, but you know, they were getting everyone involved and being like, look, we fucked up, like help us make new sunscreens. What do you want? We want to apologize. We want to make something that you really, really want and make a sunscreen that was just as good as the one you loved before, but actually works this time. And since then, Purito really have established themselves as a really trustworthy K-beauty brand that just makes amazing products. They were at the time, but this scandal really did affect them and a few other brands. I love them. I use all their products. Oh, I've been to their labs. I trust them. Other brands like Dear Claire's and Crave also issued apologies, recalled their sunscreens, and initiated reformulations. It took a little while longer for Crave and Dear Claire's to relaunch a sunscreen, but they did manage to regain the confidence of their consumers again. Pretty much every brand who did this, like Purito, managed to regain that confidence because they were transparent. They quickly apologized, admitted the mistakes, and told us what the mistake was. They didn't just recall their products and go silent. We as consumers were taken through the whole process of like creating new sunscreens, and that really was just to win back the trust, the openness that the brands had with consumers. Some could even argue that the controversy was a great thing to happen to the world of Korean sunscreen brands. The sunscreen scandal actually led to major changes, not just in the way they formulate and manufacture their products, but also in sunscreen regulations in Korea. So how was this allowed to happen? First of all, let's dive into this. In Korea, the scandal prompted calls for stricter regulations and testing standards for sunscreens. A significant part of the scandal revolved around regulatory gaps in how SPF values are tested and verified in Korea. Unlike some other countries, Korea allows brands to outsource testing to third-party labs, which may not always follow stringent guidelines or may conduct tests under conditions that don't accurately reflect real-world usage. For example, some labs in Korea were found to rely purely on in vitro testing, which is laboratory-based testing, rather than in vivo testing on human skin, which could lead to discrepancies in SPF results. Though that was just one part of the problem, it seems. The manufacturing process for cosmetics and the specific regulations in Korea can be a bit complicated, and I'll try to give you a quick overview here so we can understand how it all happened. But if you want a more detailed breakdown, then please go and check out Odile Minogue's video. I believe that's how you pronounce her name. She works in the K-beauty industry. Her videos are so insightful, and I learned all this from her sunscreen video, which I'll link down below. But if you want a better understanding of this, please go check out her video. So Korean regulations, like some other parts in the world, separate cosmetics into 2 main categories: general cosmetics and functional cosmetics. Functional cosmetics, as the name implies, are cosmetics that serve a function, like sunscreen, which protects skin from UV rays. And in Korea, functional cosmetics are required to get pre-market approval by the Korean Ministry of Food and Drug Safety, the MFDS before they can be sold to the public. General cosmetics don't require this approval. And that all sounds fine on the face of it, right? Like, that kind of makes sense. But the issue with this process starts when you look into who is actually doing the testing and how the products are created in the first place. The MFDS don't do pre-market testing on cosmetic products themselves. Instead, there are several testing inspection agencies which have been authorized by the Korean government to carry out these tests. So when a brand wants to create a new product, they can either formulate and manufacture it in-house, which is very expensive, or they can formulate this product themselves and then pay a manufacturer to produce it. This option is a little cheaper and actually more common, like most brands do this, right? Or they can outsource the entire process to a company that will do the formulation and the manufacturing for them. This is the cheapest option and is very popular among smaller to medium-sized brands around the world. So whatever option a brand chooses, either they or the manufacturer they've hired, depending on who formulated the product, has to submit the product for testing by one of the approved agencies. They then send the test results on to the MFDS, who review the results and approve or deny the formulation on the basis of what they have been provided. The trouble with this is that if they outsource the process, then the brand has to trust the external company to do everything right when it comes to formulation, production, and testing. It's worth noting here that all the products affected in the scandal were produced by the same two external manufacturers, as we mentioned before, which seems to point to issues with those manufacturers specifically, rather than Korean sunscreen manufacturers as a whole. Now, another serious issue that Adele mentioned, with the regulations at the time was that despite all functional cosmetics being required to go through this pre-market approval, there was one exception. If a new product is similar enough to a product that has already been pre-approved by the MFDS, then it doesn't have to get pre-market approval. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky. To be fair, there is a fairly long list of requirements for a product to qualify for this exemption, including that it must contain the same active ingredients in the same quantities and have the same efficacy and effects as the original product. Essentially, it has to be the same product. However, the main issue with this is that some brands got into the habit of abusing this loophole in order to get products approved more quickly and cheaply. Every time a brand or manufacturer submits a product for pre-market approval, they have to pay a fee, and it could take months for approval to be granted. So instead of paying more fees and waiting for approval, they just claim products were similar enough to meet the requirements, when in reality, there had actually been significant changes to the formulation. For example, the Perito Centella Green Level Unscented Sun SPF 50+ started out life as a sunscreen cream. However, the brand wanted to improve application and stability, so they reformulated it into a lotion, so it's going to be much lighter. Now, the test samples were submitted, so they just used the same SPF value from the original cream formulation on their new product. But obviously the formula had changed drastically, as it was later discovered obviously that the SPF value had dropped significantly from the original cream. If you want to know more about this, please go check out Adil's video where she goes into way more detail about the changes to Perito sunscreen and the other affected products in her video if you want to know more about it. It is fascinating, so you can see why people had a mistrust for Perito, and they worked hard to gain back that trust. And as I mentioned, this obviously had huge effects on sunscreen regulation and perception. The scandal raised questions about the robustness of the SPF certification process and how closely Korean regulators were overseeing these practices. The MFDS, which oversees the approval of testing of sunscreens, as we mentioned, was basically bullied to reevaluate its guidelines and testing protocols, and rightfully so. As a result, the MFDS began requiring more rigorous testing, especially from these third-party labs, before products could be marketed with a specific SPF claim. The scandal obviously sparked broader conversations about the importance of consistent and transparent sunscreen testing, not just in Korea, but across the world, formulating and approving and testing to the same standard. The same guidelines, I guess you can say, rigorous standards. Consumers, especially in Western markets, became more aware of the potential discrepancies in sunscreen efficacy. For a while, many began favoring sunscreens tested under what they considered to be more established regulatory bodies like the FDA or Cosmetics Europe standards, which has stricter guidelines for SPF SPF and UVA testing, sorry. The EU, for example, has what many regard as the strictest requirements for both UVB and UVA protection. SPF test follows ISO standards, which includes in vivo tests and UVA testing in vitro testing, to ensure that at least 1/3 of the labeled SPF rating is dedicated to UVA protection, which is a higher standard than both the US and Korea. I hope that makes sense. That's kind of confusing. But in the US, the FDA requires rigorous in vivo and in vitro testing for both SPF and broad spectrum UVA protection. They also have specific and strict thresholds for labeling sunscreens and products that must prove stability and efficacy under various conditions. But although the regulations in the USA are stricter, and some may say too strict, there may be a better balance to find here. The FDA's approval of new cutting-edge ingredients is often very slow, too slow. For example, the FDA has only approved 17 physical and chemical UV filters for use in sunscreens, whereas the EU has approved 27 different filters. And this is in part what's led to the reputation of US sunscreens being chalky, greasy, and less effective, and more expensive than the other options from other countries. They just don't have the same range of ingredients to work with as brands in other countries do. I think that's slowly changing. I think coming into 2025 as well, they're going to introduce a few more, mainly thanks to K-beauty sunscreens. And in fact, the FDA hasn't added a new approved sunscreen in their list since 2002, which feels very, very slow. And it's worth remembering that Korean brands aren't the only ones to have ever been involved in any kind of testing scandal when it comes to sunscreen. This isn't a K-beauty issue, it's a sunscreen issue. For example, in 2019, AMA Laboratories, a US testing facility, was charged with falsifying results on sunscreens over a period of 30 years between 1987 and 2017. And as a result of the controversy, many K-beauty brands began reformulating their sunscreens in general, ensuring compliance with stricter third-party testing requirements. Brands also became way more transparent in sharing their testing process with consumers in order to regain the trust that had been lost. And when you go shopping for K-beauty online on websites like YesStyle, or especially like Olive Young and Style Korean, you will see that brands will post everything there is to see about the approval and the testing of their sunscreens. They will say it's been tested by third-party labs in the US and in Europe. They will post the results of their SPF ratings. They are so transparent nowadays, without saying, because of the scandal, this is what we're doing now. They want the consumer's trust again, and they're doing that by being fully transparent and investing more money into having these tests done as well. And the scandal really did serve as a wake-up call for the entire skincare industry, really reinforcing the importance of accurate labeling and transparency in product claims. Since then, the conversation around SPF testing and regulation has evolved, leading to improved testing protocols and higher scrutiny in the cosmetics industry. So where do Korean sunscreens stand today? Despite suffering such a major blow, a huge blow to their image among consumers, Korean sunscreen brands seem to have managed to restore much of the trust and confidence that they lost. And they managed to do it in an impressively short amount of time. The brands involved, and Perito in particular, could undoubtedly have done things better in terms of preventing this in the first place, like questioning the external manufacturer's claims a bit more closely, having a few more tests done, but the way it was handled by most of the brands involved should serve as a template for brands across the wider beauty market. When you are involved in a controversy, admit your mistakes, apologize to your customers, offer refunds, be open about what went wrong and what you're doing to fix it, and then actually do what you said you're gonna do. It doesn't seem to be that hard, as these brands proved. If more beauty brands did that, then consumers as a whole would likely have more trust in the industry. The Korean sunscreen scandal is perfect evidence of this, and the controversy could have easily killed the growing popularity of not just Korean sunscreens, but K-beauty in the Western market. But instead, they've come back, rebuilt trust, and returned to the top of the sunscreen world. I think especially with K-beauty now going viral again on TikTok, we're seeing that K-beauty is not just a trend. A lot of these new skincare enthusiasts on TikTok are unaware of the sunscreen scandal, which was only 4 years ago. Around the time TikTok became popular. But yes, as we saw, they just did everything right to regain the trust of the consumer, and people wanted back their favorite K-beauty sunscreens because they're just amazing when they work, when they actually work. Let me know if you were affected by this scandal. Were you one of the people who just kept getting burnt by your Claire's and Perito sunscreens? Let me know in the comments down below. Watch some more commentary style videos here, some general light entertainment here, and I'll see you next time.